So today we talk Venom.
Venom, Venom, Venom,
Can I get away with that?
Venom.
I can't. It's Venom. The main story of Venom follows an investigative reporter called Eddie Brock, who is played by Tom Hardy. He eventually gets taken over by a symbiote, not symbiote, a symbiote, and becomes Venom. Now, where this comes from is from a character called Carlton Drake, who is the main villain of the story, played by Riz Ahmed. He believes that the Earth is devouring all of its resources and is going to burn up within the next generation or two, and believes the answer to that is in space, and specifically in these symbiotes. So the story starts with a crash landing of one of his spaceships onto Earth with the symbiotes. He gets these symbiotes back to their lab. One eventually attaches itself to Eddie Brock, and then he becomes Venom. From that point onwards, it's basic, generic, good guy versus bad guy. Good guy looking to save the day and then prevails. Now, is this a good film? So the answer is both yes and no. I'll split that into, is this objectively a good film, and is this an enjoyable film? Is this objectively a good film? No. No, it's not. I believe that the film is quite confused from start to finish. And what I mean by that is tonally, it's really, really weird. Now, it starts off almost kind of like this sci-fi horror kind of vibe, which I kind of enjoyed, I'm not going to lie, goes well in tone with Venom itself. And then halfway through, probably about more of a quarter way through, when the symbiote attaches itself to Eddie and he starts discovering everything, it then shifts in tone almost instantly from a sci-fi horror to a slapstick comedy. Don't get me wrong, at times that comedy is really funny, and the interaction between Venom and Eddie Brock is really quite funny. However, the shift in tone is something that takes you by surprise, and you almost find yourself looking around to say, has anyone else noticed this? Is this just me? It doesn't feel like it's just me. Everyone surely has seen that, right? So from that perspective, it's not great. In terms of the script and the overall story itself, it's poor, I would say. This script doesn't offer for much, and the overall story is very, very basic. I mean, considering where the original Venom comes from in terms of the comics, in terms of Spider-Man, and considering what we got from this film, as a comic book fan, as a Spider-Man fan, and as a Venom fan, is quite disappointing, really. And it's easy to see why people have responded to it the way that they have responded to it, but at the same time, I don't think that people are giving it any recognition for the things that it does well. So I'll get onto that in a minute from my enjoyment side of it. I want to talk about the origin a little bit more in terms of the Spider-Man and where we got. So originally, Venom is ultimately created because of Spider-Man. So the story is that the symbiote attaches itself to Peter Parker as Spider-Man. He becomes the Spider-Man with the black suit and ends up detaching itself. That then attaches onto Eddie Brock and becomes Venom. He has a vendetta against Spider-Man because through Peter Parker having the black Spider-Man suit, he outs Eddie Brock as a scam artist, and he gets him fired from the Daily Bugle. And because of that, he then has a vendetta against Peter Parker, who is Spider-Man, and then when he becomes Venom, there's your rivalry. However, because Spider-Man or Peter Parker isn't in this film at all, they've taken a different spin on what the comics have done for its origin. Now, there is elements of comic within this film, i.e. the other symbiotes, because they have followed the storyline of the Life Foundation and its creation of multiple symbiotes. However, they've only chosen to use two, if you look really deep into it, but one of those symbiotes and Venom, which limits yourself to the kind of story that you can tell, and the result of it is quite a basic good guy versus bad guy, and doesn't really feel like much of anything when you're watching it. It very much feels like the good guy's here to save the day, even though he's not really a good guy. He's a good guy, and then he comes to save the day from the bad guys. That's pretty much it in terms of story. So it is quite basic, and it's quite disappointing, really, considering that this character and this franchise has got such a huge following, and that's the result of the origins, really. So it's a shame that that's the result that we got, considering the source material that it has. However, the enjoyment out of this film, I did find myself enjoying it, even though at times didn't really feel like it made much sense. After the first 30 minutes of introduction into the character and it got into the Venom side of things, I really quite enjoyed it. Tom Hardy really flexing his ability to adapt to a strange kind of character here and doing it really well. He's quite easily the best part of this film. All the other characters are not really, you don't really get that invested with, unfortunately. However, Tom Hardy really showcases why he is one of the top actors in Hollywood at the moment, because he can do these roles and adapt to these roles very well. Even though you wouldn't really put Tom Hardy in this type of role, he blended to it quite well, which was quite nice. His interaction between himself and Venom the symbiote, so he manifests himself in a physical form, but you also hear him within his head as well. That leads on for very funny material, and you do find yourself laughing out loud quite a few times in the film, which is really nice, because that's the kind of thing you would expect between them. The action scenes within the film are really good. However, the one disappointment I've got with regards to the action scenes are the majority of them, if not all of the action scenes, are exclusively filmed in the dark. Now, when you compare nighttime with Venom, both black, it makes it very difficult to follow what's going on, especially when you've got a lot of things going on in terms of fighting, in terms of chaos, in terms of things flying around. It's very hard to keep a track of what is going on. Aside from that, the rest of the action I thought was very good, kept you engaged, and overall I didn't necessarily say that I felt bored during the film, which is a good thing. I found myself tossing and turning over my enjoyment, which is a really odd thing to have to go through when you're trying to obviously concentrate on a film. I think overall, I don't think that it deserves the slating that it's currently getting. I know that some people either really love it or really hate it. I'm kind of in the middle on this. I wouldn't say that I hated it, I wouldn't say I loved it. I enjoyed it enough for what it was, but at the same time, what it was disappointed me, if that makes sense. Does it make sense? I don't know. Maybe it makes sense. Overall, I do think this is a run-of-the-mill superhero movie. There's definitely superhero films out there that are a much better quality and much better standard and are much better films, but there are absolutely films out there that are much worse than this, and I do just think this is a standard run of the mill, and it's floating in the middle from in terms of where I rank this against other superhero films. Does this fit inside the MCU? Currently I'm going to say no, because there's absolutely no connection to any of the MCU films, nor does it have any connection to the Spider-Man universe at the moment. There is nothing there to connect it other than the fact that this is a Spider-Man character. So at the moment, I suppose we don't really know where we are with this. Is it just going to be a standalone franchise? I don't think so, considering what Venom is and who Venom needs to interact with and broaden itself. I don't think it's going to be in a standalone version. I think it belongs around certain other characters. So I suppose the jury's out to see whether or not it's actually classed as MCU, or it's just going to be in its own little franchise, or the Spider-Verse that Sony has. But we'll see how that unfolds, considering MCU and Sony's relationship with Spider-Man at the moment. Post-credit scenes, I'm not really going to get into the post-credit scenes a lot, simply because it's going to throw up too much of a spoiler, but there are two post-credit scenes. Second one I can talk about because it's nothing new. First one I will just glance over a little bit. Got me quite excited about the first post-credit scene. I can imagine that would mirror, my excitement would be mirrored by anyone that is a Spider-Man fan. I'll leave it at that, but it's definitely worth watching. If you go and see the film, it's definitely worth watching the first post-credit scene. The second post-credit scene is literally a snippet straight out of the Into the Spider-Verse film that's coming out later on this year. So if you're interested in that as well, I believe there's quite a lot of trailers out there. I've tried not to watch them just to see what it's like when it first comes out, but that's in there as well. So you can stay for that one. I personally didn't. I just found out what that was and other people told me about it, but you don't really have to watch that. Overall, I'm not going to give this film a rating. I'm going to move away from the rating scales. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a recommend or not recommend this film. Again, it fits in the both. I would recommend it to certain people, but then again, I wouldn't recommend it. You know what? I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to do it. I've made it. I will recommend this film. And I will do so purely from my overall enjoyment. I did find myself enjoying this film, and that's obviously what moviegoers want to go see. They want to see and get enjoyment out of this film. Doesn't mean that it's a great film. I'm going to throw it out there. It is not a great film. It is not a, I wouldn't say it's a terrible film. It is not a great film. It is just an okay version of what it is, because the material doesn't allow it to be any more than what it is. If you've seen the film, let us know what you think in the comments section below. Remember to like the video and don't forget to subscribe. We've got some great content coming out with some more movie reviews, also some fragrance reviews coming up from Nick as well. See you later, guys.